Hello, thanks for being in a new video. This time I have a full review of the POCO F6 Pro. Let's get started. Of all POCO's devices, the F series is the top of the line, although we could not consider it as a flagship. But within the POCO brand, these are the most competitive devices, therefore they are also their most expensive devices. So in Mexico, this device has a launch price of 9,499 pesos, which in dollars is more or less 520, although remember that prices here are not the same as over there. In Mexico, taxes are included, and in general, prices are a little higher than in the rest of the world. But that's just a fun fact. Let's see below what this device can offer us, whose distribution in Mexico and in many other countries is mainly online. So if you don't like to shop online, you're probably facing your first difficulty, but I think it is becoming more and more common to buy online, so it should not represent too much of a problem. Let's get to know it. Let's start by talking about the design, where we will find something very positive, both in aesthetics and in resistance, since on the front we have a screen with ultra-reduced bezels, and this screen comes protected with Gorilla Glass Victus, a glass that is usually seen in much more expensive devices, but it is very good to see this level of protection from this price range. In addition, in the frames we will find aluminum to give it a lot of resistance also against any fall. On the right side we find power and volume buttons, while on the top there is a microphone and also the infrared to work as a universal remote control. In addition, there are some small bands in plastic to help the connectivity of the antennas, since the frame, as I told you, is completely metallic. It has a thickness of 8.21 millimeters, and as you notice from this right profile, we do not find any buttons. At the bottom we will find the slot to put the nano SIM cards. In fact, it has two trays available to be able to have this dual SIM function. In addition, we will find a microphone, the USB-C port, and the main speaker. And although it does not integrate any level of protection against water, note that the tray does have a small gasket that will ensure that at least that area is more difficult for water to enter. But it is definitely a disadvantage that it does not have any level of water resistance, since in this price range there are already several competitors that do have that feature as part of their design. Aesthetically, the back cover looks very nice. In fact, it also feels good to the touch with a soft cover, in this case with a bit of a color gradient finish and a small visual pattern on the bottom, although a white color edition is also available. But this black color edition also has the camera rings accented in gold color to give it a nice touch. Plus, this area of the camera module is reflective. So it has a dual finish. It looks like little has improved quite a bit in design, as previous devices looked much less premium. But in this case, by adding the aluminum frame and modifying the back cover design, it seems to me to have taken a major leap, in addition to offering Gorilla Glass Victus. But it still has sections to improve on this design issue. The 6.67-inch screen offers us the same size that Xiaomi usually offers in all its devices. So, it is a screen to which you are probably already accustomed, at least in terms of dimensions. But in this case it offers us a very high resolution. It is called WQHD+, which to be exact is 1440 by 3200 pixels, so you have a density of 526 pixels per inch. Something that even at the high end will be hard to find. So, the screen really is spectacular. It's one of those points where the device excels too much over its competitors, since it is a panel called Flow AMOLED. That is to say, it is going to offer us very good color intensity, also very good contrast. And they simply call it Flow AMOLED because they can make the screen have very thin edges. So, it's a screen that I insist it's very good everywhere you look. It reaches 120 Hz in its refresh rate, so it's also able to show you very smooth movements. It doesn't have LTPO technology though, so it can't go down to 1 Hz to consume less battery on static content. But either way, it's a very good display that peaks at 4000 nits when displaying HDR content. Since remember that some areas of the screen will have the ability to emit more power in the light to give more realism to these HDR videos. In fact, it is also compatible with the Dolby Vision and HDR XP standards, so everywhere you look it is a display that is even capable of outperforming other high-end devices, therefore it is one of its strongest points. In addition, it will be a comfortable screen to use both outdoors and indoors or at night, since the minimum brightness is also considerably low and the dimming rate is 3840 Hz, so it is a screen that will not produce eye strain easily. In fact, it also has a special sunlight mode so that it further increases the brightness. And notice that it also has a section called Advanced Textures that will add some other blurring effects around the whole system so that when you interact you have an even nicer experience. However, it does tell you that it will consume more battery, so it is not recommended too much to use it. Note that it also has different color calibration modes for the user to choose specifically which one is their favorite. Personally, I do like how it looks with original Pro color, but I insist that you could also access advanced settings so you can select a specific color gamut or also determine how much red, green or blue you want it to have. Even specifically select issues like hue, saturation, contrast and many other things. So, within the smartphone market, it is one of the devices that has the most amount of customization in terms of the color representation that its screen makes. Even note that it has the adaptive colors feature, which will try to simulate the ambient color so that you have a much more natural display, something that is available on very few devices, so that's another feature that can get to stand out. So, not only do we have a very good display at the hardware level, but also as part of the software, it comes very complemented with many options to customize it. Also note that it has the reading mode, where you can have some filter effects for a more comfortable view. You can even add a texture to try to imitate the paper on the screen so that, I insist, you have an even more comfortable viewing. The screen resolution through software is adapted in Full HD+, but if you want, you can take advantage of the full resolution it has, although obviously it will consume more battery. Even through software also brings some image enhancers very similar to what we see on TVs, although they are disabled, but you could improve the level of detail of the images you are watching. Through artificial intelligence, it will also optimize the colors and the dynamic range, but as I say, all these functions are turned off so as not to consume so much battery. But if you want, you can enjoy a more advanced viewing experience when you turn them on. The device integrates two speakers, one at the bottom and one that is shared with the headset for calls. So in this area, not only do calls sound, but also music. The bottom speaker is the one that has a greater presence of bass frequencies, but the complementary speaker, I think, greatly enhances the experience with a considerably wide stereo sound. The sound quality, I think, is in keeping with the range, delivering perfectly. So let's listen to a little test, though remember, it's not the same listening to it live. But just like the display, it also comes with good add-ons as part of the software. For example, note that it has Dolby Atmos, or you can change it for the Xiaomi sound option, but it is recommended to leave it with Dolby Atmos, and note that it also has a graphic equalizer with multiple presets and also 10 bands available to fully customize how you want these speakers to sound, giving a completely good experience for all users. It also has a surround sound option that you can turn on to increase the spaciousness of the stereo sound. So the experience is very good unless you want to use wired headphones, as it does not have a headphone jack and you will have to use USB-C headphones if you want to keep the highest quality and lowest latency, or you could also connect wireless headphones to it. The good news is that in terms of advanced codecs, it brings support for the aptX codec and also aptX adaptive, but also for a more advanced codec called LDAC, which is available in high-end headphones to enjoy excellent sound resolution. It even supports the LHDC codec in version 3. So, it brings very good codec support, so the audio experience is going to be very good, I insist, unless for you the headphone jack is indispensable. There are two microphones available on this device, one on the top and one on the bottom. So if it has stereo recording, which is the least we could expect at this price, we are going to hear its quality.
Esta es una prueba de grabación de sonido utilizando los micrófonos integrados del POCO F6 Pro.
It picks up voices with sufficient quality, but below you will see a video recorded with this device setting the sound system in my living room at maximum volume to see how it behaves in these environments. It is definitely confirmed that these microphones can suffer in very noisy environments, distorting the sound quite a bit, so it is not recommended to use it for concerts. The front camera is 16 megapixels with f2.4 aperture. This is another element that Xiaomi tends to repeat a lot in all of its devices, so it doesn't seem to give much priority to this. Obviously it has fixed focus, but I like that the crop is pretty tiny and doesn't use a lot of space. In this case, it has a shortcut to double press the volume down button to quickly access the camera, or you can also double press the power button to do this action, although it is an option that comes turned off by default. But as I tell you, in the settings you could enable it, and note that it is very useful because even being in any other application, you can do this gesture to quickly switch to the camera. The front camera seems to have good agility when taking multiple captures, although in this case it does not integrate a burst, but if you hold down the shutter you can start the short recording of a video. We will also find beauty options with different parameters that we can apply to perfect your face. In fact, it is one of the devices with more beauty options that I have found lately. The interface is quite clean, and if you slide from top to bottom you can access more options such as the easy capture showing the palm of the hand, which can be very useful, or also here you can quickly access the timer. You can also enable the option to touch any area of the screen to take the picture, or activate a floating shutter so you can drag this shutter to the area you want and where you feel more comfortable to take pictures. In this case, you will see several pictures taken from Dubai where this device was launched. In the case of the front camera, we found a good enough quality. I think little has ever excelled in photography, and this is no exception. The camera has fixed focus, so if you are a little closer to the camera, I think you will get a better result. It's not an exaggeratedly wide camera, so you could fit in a group of 2 extra friends, especially if they are at the same distance as you, because obviously if they stand further back, you could get more people in the picture. But as it has fixed focus, remember that those further away will come out quite out of focus. In backlit scenes, the preview still doesn't look optimized, but it does detect that it needs to use HDR. So the processed photograph looks much better in highlight and shadow balance, but again the color doesn't seem to have as much level of accuracy as we would find on the rear camera. So let's say it's a camera that delivers, but it's not that spectacular. Indoors again, the camera is going to offer us something very similar. You just notice that it's not one of the priorities of little to give such an advanced front camera. But I think that for a good number of people, this front camera gives good pictures. In the evenings, if you have a good light source near you, I think the result will be good enough. Again, it's not that detailed a photo, but it delivers for a good number of people. What I like most is that even though you don't see as much noise present, it doesn't wash out textures as might happen with some other smartphones. So, I like that the textures hold up well and you don't get to notice as much noise. Just a bit of graininess in the darker areas, but in that sense the work is very good. Even backlit night photography, which is one of the trickier scenarios, I think it handles it well, and if you use the night mode with the additional screen as a flash simulation, I think the result is even better. Portrait photography will also give us a good quality. Notice the bokeh effect it generates in the background. It's quite nice, although if you look at the closer details, you'll notice that it doesn't have as much detail as we'd like. But I think for social networking the photo looks good. In fact, notice how it is able to keep objects in focus in this case. Although not 100% of the time, but it is something extremely remarkable because almost no device in this range manages to have a result of these characteristics. Generally, all of them also defocus any kind of object that is in the foreground. So the detection seems to be very advanced. So the portrait photography of this front camera is of good quality. On the back, we will find a photographic system composed of 3 cameras. It has the 16mm camera, ultra-wide, with 8 megapixels in its sensor, f2.2 aperture and fixed focus. It is not a very advanced camera. Then there is the 24mm camera, considered the main camera, with 50 megapixels on its sensor, which is made by OmniVision. And we find an f1.6 aperture with autofocus and optical stabilization. So, obviously it's the most advanced camera of these 3. And finally, there's on this side the 2 megapixel macro camera with f2.4 aperture. We'll see whether or not it has any use in a moment. Like all cell phones, it has a bit of camera latency. which is normal. But the capture also has that little bit of lag, so it's a little difficult to capture the exact moment. You have to anticipate a little bit. Remember that it also has a burst available, which is activated by sliding the shutter to the right, and it doesn't take long to start, so it's pretty good. It supports up to 50 photos. In the options, we'll also find some color filters that we can use to change the aesthetics of our photograph, and we also have the beauty mode, but in this case with a single slider parameter. If we touch on screen, we can adjust the exposure or also the focus, but we can enter the professional mode to control more parameters. For example, the white balance, it can also be the focus, the shutter speed, which can go up to 30 seconds, or also the ISO, which can go up to 12,800. This is a considerably high ISO that is not available on a lot of devices. Finally, there is also the exposure compensation and obviously also the access to some color filters. However, something curious is that it does not allow raw photography, but on this side we do find some additional settings to configure the saturation, contrast, and sharpness of the photograph. Fortunately, it is capable of scanning QR codes, although the button that appears in the lower right corner to activate the action is very discreet. And with respect to documents, note that it will also immediately suggest us to enter a special document mode where we can scan in a very simple way any type of photograph or document. Although it does not allow us to add several sheets with ease, but in this part it will allow us to adjust the crop and even apply some effects so that it does not look simply like a cropped photograph, but it looks like a photocopy or a much more professional scanner. It would even allow us to remove any kind of point or shadow cast on that image. So, it's a considerably advanced scanner, and if you want it to be a PDF file, you just hold down and send it to print, although unfortunately you can't add multiple pages to your printout because it's not compatible. The device also offers us a high-resolution mode with 50 megapixels, and you definitely do get to distinguish a well-detailed picture in this case. So you can zoom in and still see good details in the picture to extract some cropping. Scenes with fast movements are obviously not going to capture them with too much definition, but it is something that we could not demand from a device of this price. The same will happen with the ultra-wide camera, although honestly it is not something serious. The main camera outdoors I think is going to give us a good level of detail. It looks a picture in this sense with a good resolution. Maybe the colors are not so accurate. As I told you, confirming to us that little, it does not usually give exaggerated priority to the cameras. With the ultra-wide camera, it seems to me that the colors are a bit more accurate, at least in this example. Although remember that the ultra-wide camera can generate slight distortions in the edges that in this case honestly are not so noticeable. So the quality is good. Indoors, note that the result with the main camera is going to be good. In this case, I think it has better color accuracy. So there are generally some cameras that when there's not as much light, they perform better. And it seems to me that this could be one of those cases. What I like is that in the darker area anyway, it doesn't seem to present too much noise. So the quality of the indoor photography I liked. With the ultra-wide camera, in these types of settings, you're going to notice a little bit of chromatic aberration perhaps if there are some lit areas. And what you will notice that is increased quite a bit over the main camera is the amount of noise, especially in the darker areas. But if you don't get too close to see too much detail, I think the picture quality is good for a good number of people. In this case, through the camera interface, it suggests the zoom to 2x, but it doesn't seem to be able to maintain 100% optical quality. Although still on the zoom 2x, I think the quality is good. In this case, you're looking now at a picture with zoom 5x, where you definitely notice that we're talking about digital zoom. And the maximum you get is 10x. And I think that's within the acceptable range. It's not spectacular, and it confirms, as I told you, that this device will focus more on other things. In backlit conditions, the preview doesn't look as optimized, but remember that it does detect that it's going to use HDR, so the result with the main camera looks better balanced in matters of highlights and shadows. Notice that this area that appeared completely burned out already reveals the presence of some shadows as well. Evidently, in this type of setting, a little more chromatic aberration is likely to be revealed right at the division between the shadows and highlights. And the handling of the darker areas I think is positive. Then there are still some areas a bit overexposed, so not a photographic expert, but the result comes out well. With the ultra-wide camera, it's a very similar result. Here we are looking at another one of these photographs with quite extreme backlighting, and obviously the shadow area can be a little darker than we would have liked. The ultra-wide camera, interestingly, as I anticipated, handles colors more accurately in these kinds of complex lighting scenarios. But if you want to take wide shots with the main camera, you could also use the panorama mode. Although in this case, I think panoramic photography could be complicated, especially in this type of backlit scenarios or when there are people in motion, which is normal in all other devices. At night, the ultra-wide camera obviously does not perform as spectacularly. I think it does manage to collect a sufficient amount of light though. I like the way it handles various lit areas, although the areas with much more light could be overexposed. The detail here is that when you use the night mode, there is not much evolution in the photographic result. It practically looks the same, so maybe the night mode could be improved. With the main camera, there is a bit of difference between using and not using night mode, although it's not very noticeable to the naked eye. If you get closer, obviously the main camera improves the treatment of the most illuminated areas. And in this case, this area is where I noticed the difference between night mode and auto mode. Notice that with night mode we're going to have a little bit more definition and detail, but it's a very similar result, which speaks well of the main camera. In the test that I usually do, the difference between automatic mode and night mode is a little more noticeable, especially as I say in the more exposed areas, just as it happens with the main camera between automatic mode and night mode. But in the rest of the photography, I think they handle noise well in both cases, although the colors don't look as intense. For small objects, this is as close as you can get. If you zoom in a bit, you might notice a bit more detail, though remember, it's not an optical quality zoom, so the result is still not that advanced in macro. So in this case, you might find the macro camera a little bit more useful because it does allow you to get a lot closer, but it's useful because of limitations of the main camera and not on its own merits. So yes, it can give you good detail shots of very small objects, although the color is a bit bad. And for portrait photography, look at the results we could get. They are really very good in this case, although it does not allow us to apply zoom in the photographs to have a telephoto perspective, but if there is a fairly far distance between the foreground and background, the blur will apply it quite intensely. Otherwise, the blur will not be as intense, although note that it is able to detect even objects in the foreground. So, I think that portrait photography is definitely of a good level, although it would be much better if it allowed us to zoom while maintaining optical quality to have a telephoto perspective. And even in night portraits with a lot of backlighting, it will generate this kind of quite advanced blur effect. And since it does detect objects, you could achieve these kinds of results. Definitely, the bokeh effect is very nice and very advanced, and the foreground detection is also considerably good. For video recording, a pleasant surprise is that this device has support for 8K resolution, something very difficult to see in a device of this price. It is at 24 frames per second, but obviously it is recommended to record in full HD or maximum in 4K, although the device integrates this type of capabilities. In fact, it could also record in 4K at 60 frames per second, but only with the main camera, since the ultra-wide camera does not have the capacity to record at 60 frames per second, so its maximum quality is full HD at 30. In the video recording interface, we will also find the button to access the different color filters available, although they are not compatible with video recording. There is also a slider to activate a beauty mode and also a bokeh effect for portrait recording. When recording a video, note that you have a simple slider for zooming, but it does not offer quick shortcuts to change any specific setting. It also has a pause and resume button, a button to take pictures, but no button to rotate to the front camera without stopping the video. It also doesn't have a button to turn on the flashlight, so it seems that the recording interface is still very simple. Although you should note that within the professional mode, we are also offered a video recording mode where we can configure other parameters. Also note that in conjunction with a tablet or other Xiaomi devices with the latest software, you could enable an option called director mode, and one of the devices will be the monitor and the others will be the cameras. Obviously, for this to work, they have to be on the same Wi-Fi network, but notice how easy it is. So at this point we have a multi-camera system, and simply with the tablet we can take a look at all the cameras that we can have connected and switch to the one that we want to select to record. So it's a multi-camera mode that you could take advantage of. The 4K recording looks very detailed. That's actually a positive thing. You can see that it's going at a good bit rate per second. So even in fast movements we have a good performance. The ultra-wide camera doesn't have 4K recording capabilities, so it doesn't look as detailed video, but it's still good. However, it is a camera that does require very good lighting, as for example in indoor scenes the movements will not look so well defined, and also the white balance could be changing a little more abruptly. It is not recommended to record against the backlight because it will give priority to illuminate the face and the background will be quite burned. If you stop detecting the face, it will gradually try to balance itself, but it still seems to be trying to maintain a balance so as not to have aggressive jumps in the lighting. So the positive thing is that it doesn't jump in the lighting very aggressively, but it can't do a very good balance. And it's curious because it also integrates an HDR mode with what you could try to improve this result, but again we don't see such an advanced balance of highlights and shadows, although the result for its range seems to me to be very good. Note that the more time passes, the more it manages to define some of the shadows that are present in the most illuminated area. And it also has an HDR XP recording mode, but the result is really bad. Notice that the shadow area looks a bit strange when there is motion, and in terms of light balance it's pretty much the same. The ultra-wide camera underperforms in this regard, so it's not so recommended to record with it in backlight. And at night the ultra-wide camera can definitely suffer a lot more. Fortunately, it controls noise well, so you don't see a video with exaggerated noise, but it doesn't have as much light input nor very good color saturation, let alone a good level of detail. So the recommended thing to do at night is to record with the main camera, which has a much better lighting management. Note that some of the colored lighting that was present in this scene still shows good color and does not look overexposed. There's also a good enough level of detail, although the more brightly lit areas don't quite look as good quality, but that's something you'd only expect from a high-end camera. The stabilization of the device is good when recording video. Something that is remarkable because generally in this price range, in the video stabilization is disabled in some devices. Although when you go running, the result obviously does not come out so advanced. But if you record with the ultra-wide camera, you could try to disguise a little better this kind of movements, both when walking and when running. Interestingly, this device integrates a portrait video recording mode, something that is uncommon in devices of this price. Although the resolution is in Full HD and not in the video, it is still something remarkable. Even in this case, it did manage to keep some objects in the foreground in focus, which makes it a very advanced and very interesting alternative, something that usually does not happen. Regarding the zoom, if you record video in Full HD, you can take advantage of the full range from the ultra-wide camera to the main camera. In this case, its maximum range will be 6x, which is not exaggerated but fortunately maintains a good quality, unlike other devices where the image looks very stretched. So I like the quality of the zoom, and if you record in Full HD, obviously you won't be able to use the ultra-wide camera, but it still has the same 6x limit. Fortunately also the sliding is smooth and doesn't seem to have aggressive jumps. The fast motion mode is good because it records in Full HD, although it doesn't seem to be stabilized, but I like that you do have a manual speed setting that can go from 4x to record slightly accelerated movements, or you can take it up to 1800x, so you could even record plant growth. So you have a very good range. What would be nice is if it was also stabilized this scene. So you need to put the device on a base if you want to get a more advanced result. In slow motion, this device will give us two options. It can be in 120 frames per second while maintaining the Full HD resolution, or it can even go up to 240 frames per second. In this case, you obviously see this flickering in the lights because it is an artificial light. That is why it is more advisable to take it with natural light. By the way, it also includes an ultra slow motion mode in 960 frames per second with HD resolution. Although it looks slightly interpolated the result, but it is very good. What I don't like and bothers me too much is that it doesn't resume at normal speed, so the video ends up looking a bit strange. Only the first part goes at normal speed and then the rest of the video goes in slow motion. In fact, it can also go up to 1920 frames per second, and definitely the result is going to be even more attractive, although with exactly the same behavior. So we would like them to improve this with an update. The front camera can't record in 4K, so it's Full HD resolution. Fortunately, it has stabilization, although it is not at a very high level, and you will also notice that in backlight it does not perform as well, so it is not recommended to record with the light behind but only with front light to have a better quality in the final result. Also remember that it has fixed focus, so you could not approach any type of object, although that is something very similar in other devices in its range. Although just like the rear camera, you need to have very good lighting, because if you are shooting indoors where you don't have as much lighting, the result will definitely not look as attractive. Even the most illuminated areas could get burned out in exchange for trying to light your face well, and obviously there will be a lot more noise present, so in night scenes it's going to be very difficult to get a good result, especially if you're near a lot of light sources. Generally, you are not going to have good lighting for your face, but you can use the screen as a flash simulation to give you better lighting, and I think it is very useful in this kind of scenarios. So it is confirmed that you need good lighting to have a good result with this front camera. The front camera also allows you to record video in fast motion, in this case with an adjustable speed as in the back, so it can be from 4x's to record perfectly well movements of people or some scene. So it is fine in this sense, although it does not offer us front slow motion, which is not such a relevant absence, but I mention it because other devices do have this feature. It also does not allow you to record portrait video with the front camera, but it does include a dual recording mode, i.e., you can display the front camera and the rear camera at the same time. The video quality is in Full HD and you can dynamically change the split screen view to picture-in-picture mode. This box, you can move it along the screen, although you can't resize it, but I like that you can change the style of the video without stopping the recording and even with nice animations. It also keeps the zoom feature, but you don't have a special slider, but you have to do it with 2 fingers on the screen, but you can have this feature as well as the camera still has the focus on. So it's pretty cool, the dual recording mode on this device, much better than other even more expensive devices we've seen. It comes with Android 14 and HyperOS 1.0.3, so it comes with a good level of software, the latest from Android and the latest from Xiaomi. And best of all, they already offer us an update policy with 3 years of software updates and 4 years of security patches. So while it may not be the most advanced in the industry, at least you are already guaranteed that it will not become obsolete so soon. As software additions note, that allows us to change the style of the notification panel, although honestly I do not notice too many differences, but in the format of Xiaomi seems that they will have a little more space. But the most customization is within the lock screen, where you can have different covers configured, and obviously you will also find different levels of customization with different fonts for watches, different styles and placements, and even some magazine formats that are able to analyze your photo to give it a style in conjunction with your wallpaper. So it is very well integrated, this option. You can obviously choose your own photos or upload some preset backgrounds. I'm going to choose one of my pictures so you can see how it detects the depth, and for example it puts me on top of some letters. You can move the specific position. Of course, you can also change the text and its layout and orientation and alignment. Also in the clock, you will be able to change the style. So I insist the customization of the lock screen is one of its strongest points without a doubt, because it even allows us to apply some additional effects to our photo to make it look more creative effects, and once you're inside your lock screen, if you press and hold you can easily switch between the different covers that you have selected. It also offers us the always on display feature, where you can show analog or digital clocks or different types of phrases, and obviously has other levels of customization by changing the icons, the font, and even has these effects for when you receive notifications, and you have the always on feature. It also has the super wallpapers that Xiaomi released several generations ago and are still super attractive, although you have to download them separately. Although they are installed as if it were an application, and therefore you must give special permissions to install the application, which can scare many people. So it is very strange that being a function of the system asks you to install separately, showing that Xiaomi still has certain inconsistencies in its operating system. Let's wait for it to show you the result. Then watch, there is the wallpaper. When I lock the screen, transforms into the always on display cover, and also on the lock screen it has a different look. Then definitely that makes the device look very nice. You can also turn on the Google Assistant with the power button, take screenshots with fingers down or with the traditional buttons. In fact, you can also take partial screenshots if you hold 3 fingers on top and then draw with one of the shapes the screenshot you want to take. It also has a gesture to turn on the flashlight quickly, and curiously also includes the rear touch gesture for you to configure if you want to open an application with 2 taps on the back, or with 3 taps you can also customize another action. This also facilitates the use of the cell phone. The one-handed mode is unfortunately only reduced in portrait format, so I don't like it. It also includes a beauty mode for video calls, but only compatible with WeChat, as if we live in China. Also, Xiaomi uses the fingerprint reader as a heart rate scanner in case you need it at some point. And another interesting feature is artificial intelligence subtitles. Although you need to be part of the Xiaomi beta community, you also have available the sidebar from which you can open some apps in a floating mode, and note that in this case it will be 2 at the same time. If you try to open 3, they will replace each other. If you slide the applications to the side, you will be able to minimize them, and if you do it in a floating mode, you will have up to 4 applications running at the same time on your screen, so you have good versatility. Although it's not the most advanced in the industry. You also have the My Remote app to make it a universal remote control. You simply set up the device type and brand, and within the gallery, remember, you can hold down on people or objects and even text as well, so you can select some options very quickly. So this kind of gestures can be useful also when extracting images to make stickers or something similar. It also includes an interesting photo editor, although you must download in this section the plugins to activate the editing with artificial intelligence. It weighs 860 megabytes, so it is a complex editor, but note that in the creation part, it will allow us to enable a professional deletion. Notice that if you don't enable Pro Mode, this will just work with a simpler algorithm, but if you enable Pro Mode, it will use generative artificial intelligence, so the result might be more attractive in some scenarios, although it doesn't work 100% of the time. But notice how in this case it's going to try to imagine what would be behind this person when doing this generative fill, and the result, I tell you, sometimes it might be more attractive than others, but it's definitely very good. And in this same editor, you also have a possibility to change the sky in the photographs, although you can see that in this case it is a little confused, detecting also the wall as sky, but in other types of scenarios the result will look much more realistic, and you can apply many styles, so you can select the one you like. Even there are some where it is already a sunset or dusk effect, so you can give a different touch to your photos. The operating system looks a little more stable than in previous generations, and since it has an optical engine on the X-axis, it also gives the premium feeling in the hand when navigating with some elements, although it does not take full advantage of this optical engine because there are many actions that do not have any kind of feedback, but hopefully that can be improved in future updates. It has a fingerprint reader inside the screen that supports up to 5 different records, and its operation is completely correct. Also has facial recognition, but it is not as recommended because it is not in 3 dimensions, has a smart unlock to keep it unlocked while connected to some Xiaomi devices, but does not have the Google extended unlock that would allow you to keep it unlocked in a specific location. What is integrated is the Google Password Manager, so you can fill out forms automatically verifying through your fingerprint, therefore the operation is correct. Within the file manager, also find a secure folder in a hidden way that is revealed by doing this scroll down gesture in it. You can store all the files you want to be safeguarded, and in the security application also find the application lock, a tool that can help you to request verification before entering certain applications that you want to keep private. Also has the option to hide applications, and even also has the second space to be 2 cell phones in 1 cell phone, or each space with their own applications and files. Also has the option to hide applications, and even also has the second space to be 2 cell phones in 1 cell, or each space with its own applications and files. Does not integrate children mode, so that could improve in the future, but if you have the function of dual applications where you can use 2 instances of the same application in this phone. Also does not have a private VPN function, but with respect to the analysis against malware, this device, if you have a special analysis but has no collaboration with any specialized company cybersecurity, if you lose your phone, not only there is the Find My Device function Google, but also have a tool Xiaomi. Although it comes off, it's important that you start your session, and in this section you have to enter to Xiaomi Cloud, although it will ask for a lot of permissions. All this should already come configured so that the user can access easier, and that seems to me that could improve because the experience can become a little complicated before finally find the option that would allow you to have more chances to find your phone, and yet you still have to activate several permissions before it finally starts working. It also has the Google Digital Wellness options where you can see the time you consume on your device, set some hours to go to sleep or not to be distracted, and you can also configure your children's device if they have an Android cell phone. Finally, it also integrates the emergency options to fill in the necessary information or press 5 times the power button to initiate an emergency call. The battery has a capacity of 5000 milliamps, and in this case its duration was average within the expected, as other devices with a similar battery running this drainer in the foreground supported 4 hours with 16 minutes, and in the background while we watched with YouTube increased about 15 minutes, nothing more. So it seems that the management of the energy consumed by applications in the background is not so advanced. Fortunately in this case it does have with a power saving mode on a daily basis that could help you that the duration time is much longer, or also in an emergency. You can activate the ultra battery saving mode that obviously will restrict many things, but in an emergency comes in handy to resist much longer. Also have available some essential applications, and you can add a few more that for you are indispensable, but the rest of things will be disabled. Includes a tremendous charger of about 20 watts in the box. In this case I have a European charger, but because it is a unit for review, evidently the charger will arrive adapted to your region if you acquire it with official distribution. Is an exaggeratedly good charger that comes with USB-A, although it is a little large and heavy, but considering the power it has, I think we could still say that it is compact, because with 15 minutes of charging recovered half of the battery in 30 minutes, reached 88%, and the full charge was completed in only 36 minutes in my test. Definitely that is an exaggeratedly fast charge. Also, to protect the battery, note that brings a special section of software where you can check the temperature that has check how many times you have charged today, and select if you want to use an optimized charge, so that in case you leave charging the phone at night comes to charge much slower. Although it does not have a specific charge lock to help, the device is kept in optimal condition with your battery if you are one of those users who need to always have it plugged into the current. So I think it could still improve, as it doesn't even show us the percentage of health that the battery has, so there is no way to know how worn out it is. And note that there is another section where you can further increase the speed of the charge, but it could get hotter the cell phone, and I consider it is not so necessary to activate it, but if you want to try it there, it is available. Obviously it will not have wireless charging or reversible wireless charging, but few devices at the price can boast something like this. The device supports untapped networks, so it can give you an excellent level in your connection with good speed, and in this case, again within the security application, there is a section where you can manage which applications will be able to connect to the internet using your mobile data, and which applications will only be able to do it using Wi-Fi, so you can select very well how your data is consumed. But talking about Wi-Fi, in this case it is amazing because it supports Wi-Fi 7, so it is ready for the future. Although currently there are not many Wi-Fi 7 routers, but it is going to have a very good download speed. So it is going to have a very good download speed. It will have a very good download speed. It will also have very good stability in its accessories because it has Bluetooth 5.3 and it also has NFC, so you can make mobile payments using Google Wallet or some other banking apps. In fact, you could also connect to some devices or accessories just by bringing it close to the NFC reader, or it even has the EMA-BIM function, so if you are looking at some web page, some photo or some video, you can bring it close with another Xiaomi device that has this option, and it is going to make the transfer. It does not have FM radio, and that is an absence that some people still consider very important, and the wireless screen projection is considerably good because it is able to hide notifications and keep a more private experience, although it will be in mirrored format, and it does not have a desktop mode in this projection. In this case, it is not able to project your screen through cable with HDMI adapters, but if you can use Android Auto and on the sensors, it does not have any major absence. Remember that if you have gyroscope and also includes a physical proximity sensor that sometimes works and sometimes not, is quite strange, because when I'm not recording works fine and when I'm recording does not work well, but at least it seems that it is no longer the virtual sensor that had previously, but it seems more like a sensor that has low sensitivity and you have to be considerably close to be activated, but is not virtual. Xiaomi has an excellent ecosystem with many devices. That is its main advantage, the number of devices, but do not have as much interaction between them to take advantage of being of the same brand, but that is changing gradually. In fact, Xiaomi currently already integrates a feature called interconnectivity, with which it intends to further improve the interaction between their devices, but must be of the most recent generation, so it is expected that with future devices the ecosystem continues to improve and not only have a large number of devices but also a very good connection. Remember that also have Xiaomi share with what you could quickly share files with other devices, even also some other brands, and obviously not only has its own Xiaomi ecosystem, but it is also part of the Google ecosystem. So in many ways it feels dependent on Google. For example, to control home devices, you will need to use Google Home, which comes pre-installed, although Xiaomi Home also comes pre-installed, but it gives system priority to the Google app. However, it is worth noting that Xiaomi has its own app to control this kind of devices. Its own application to control such devices, but with respect to cloud storage, Xiaomi globally does not offer storage with Xiaomi Cloud, but even from the same gallery notes that will give you the suggestion to activate the backup directly to Google Photos. So in many ways, this device gives the feeling of being a bit dependent on Google. Let's run the performance test, which is possibly what is most striking about this device because it integrates the Snapdragon processor 8 Gen 2, a processor that is very difficult to find at this price. In fact, I think no device has a processor of these features from this price at its launch. Maybe in promotions, discounts, or in past generations you can find it, but not in a device of this same year. It took 2 points, 25 seconds or so to open each of the applications. I think it definitely shows us that it is a device that has very good power in its processor is one of its strongest points. I insist that at this price will be very difficult to find a device with the same power. Then its main focus is precisely to give you a very high performance for both applications and games in a moment. I show you the performance that can reach in games, but I think it is a device that has very good power and its processor is one of its strongest points. Performance it can reach in games, but for now I want you to see that also the RAM memory is perfectly well managed. There are versions of 12 or 16 gigabytes of RAM. In this case we are testing the base version, but also have excellent performance. You can keep open many applications at the same time without any fear that any of them will be restarted. Then the performance on this device is the strongest point without a doubt. In fact, remember that there is also a configuration called memory extension where you can extend up to an additional 8 gigabytes of virtual RAM memory, which I consider unnecessary. In fact, I would recommend disabling this configuration, but from the factory, the storage is very good with 256 gigabytes, but there are also versions of 512 gigabytes and up to a terabyte with UFS 5 storage, which together with the virtual RAM memory is very good. 5, which in conjunction with the LPDDR-X RAM memory should give a very high performance also when you are installing applications or exporting videos, for example. So let's test how long it takes to export a video in 4K by joining 4 clips that have been recorded with this device in 4K, and also the exported video is in 4K and ready. It took only 20 seconds, so it really gives you a very good experience if you want to work with it editing videos in 4K. For the games, we have Game Turbo. Although the shortcut must be created from the security application, and actually when you open it is called Game Space, so it still has inconsistencies in the Xiaomi system here in the Game Space. You can check the games you have installed, you can also give you a quick look at the current status of the phone, but the most important thing is that you can manage the performance you want your phone to have in these games, so you can select a power saving profile so you can play longer even if the game does not go as smoothly, or you can also have a balanced mode. Most important is that you can manage the performance you want your phone to have in these games, so you can select a power saving profile so you can play longer even if the game does not go so smoothly, or you can also have a balanced mode or even get to the highest quality without caring much about the power consumption. In fact, something very interesting is that you can also have a balanced mode or even get to the highest quality without caring much about the power consumption. In fact, something very interesting is that you can also access to customize in a very specific way the behavior you want the cell phone to have. For example, you can limit the frames per second rate from up to 120. Obviously does not mean that if you put 120 games will go to 120, but that will be its maximum limit. Also, you can also customize the anti-aliasing that will allow you to have more definition in the graphics. You also have the anisotropic filter that will also optimize the graphics or the quality of the texture filtering. So this is the default setting, but if you want, you can raise it to have an even more detailed experience in the games. These settings are obviously thanks to having available the Adreno GPU of Qualcomm. In fact, you could also optimize the touch controls to configure the speed of response and stability of the touches, in addition to enabling some rejection to the edges to avoid unwanted touches with the surface of your hand. You could also modify the style of color that represents the screen. That can be very useful to have better visualization in the darkest in certain games. Then all this confirms that it is a device that bets 100% of its essence to the games at the time of entering a game. You will also have the ability to optimize the touch controls to configure the speed of response and the stability of the touches. enter a game, you will also have this additional panel where, as you realize, you can see the performance that is having the device has this wild boost mode that through artificial intelligence will try to further improve the performance of the device. Although it gives you the warning that it can become hotter, then use it only if you are in a very cool environment. Otherwise, it will be better to use the balanced setting. In this case, we will try wild boost because it is the first time we have seen it available on a Xiaomi device. By default comes with the balanced setting. And I should tell you that I actually have two units. The app opening test I did with the base model, but the gaming test we are doing with the 1TB storage unit with off RAM on this side panel. You can also clear the memory quickly, free up storage, and also optimize the touch controls much faster and easier. You can also enable a do not disturb mode to avoid interruptions, start the screenshot in picture or video, and also modify the screen color setting. Also, you can project the screen directly from this panel, and you can change the style in which you receive notifications, and note that by default notifications appear in this style. In fact, you could slide down to transform it to a floating window, which can become convenient, but what I want to show you is that also includes an option to change the style of notifications. But if you enable this option, you will notice that although the device vibrates when you receive a notification, it won't appear on screen, so it won't interrupt you. It also includes an option to modify your voice in apps or games that have a chat through the microphone, so your voice sounds different in case you want to play that way. And lastly, you have timers available here on screen, which can be very useful for arena-style games. You can also open apps directly in this floating mode, and the funny thing is that you could switch to a split-screen mode, and some games could get to adapt simply as an additional fact in Call of Duty. This device by default gives us the very high graphic quality at a maximum frame rate. However, we can also go up to ultra rate and the graphic quality drops to a medium level. Obviously, if you give priority to the graphic quality, practically all the effects are available in real time, and if you give priority to the frame rate, some effects will not be available. First, we gave the priority to the graphic quality and the experience was really very good. And the experience really was very good. The numbers say it all. A practically perfect stability of 60 frames per second, as one would expect from a device that integrates this processor, but at this price it is something unusual, evidently, to play with this level of endurance, and also in conjunction with a good graphic quality. Usually at this price you could get to find devices with good stability, but you need to select simpler graphics. In this case you can select the highest graphics possible and it still maintains a good stability, but you need to select simpler graphics. In this case you can select the highest graphics possible and it still maintains a good stability, and it still maintains a good stability. And it still maintains good stability. Although when recording the screen, it could slightly reduce its performance, and in fact it got as hot as 43 degrees Celsius recording the screen. So in this game, we generally don't see this level of heating in other devices we have tested, and that's why it caught our attention. Although without recording the screen, it reduced to 42.4 degrees Celsius, and remember we had that artificial intelligence option which improved the fluidity of the game, although it did warn us that it was going to get hotter than the other devices we have tested. It did warn us that it was going to effectively heat up more, although it is very stable and very fluid, and giving priority to the rate of frames per second. Again, the experience was very good. Practically was close to reach 90 frames per second on average, then maintains a very good stability. Few fluctuations, even the lowest peak was just 86. So the performance is really very good. This processor we already knew it is very good, but it is not usual to see it at this price, although it is not usual to see in this game with this processor, but it is not usual to see it at this price, but it is not usual to see in this game with this processor with this price, but it is not usual to see in this game with this processor with this processor. It is very good. Usual to see in this game with this processor the temperature level that reached that exceeded 45 degrees Celsius. So usually in this game does not pass 41 degrees Celsius in the test that we usually do, then definitely that this function that we enabled, if you get to raise much the temperature of this processor, although I insist that the experience is really very good, then it is more advisable to activate this option if you are going to play in a cool environment. Otherwise I think it would be better to disable it. In the Legend game, we selected the Ultra setting at 60 frames per second. Although this setting is usually selected in the most expensive devices on the market, to give you an idea, in devices of this price, we usually select medium quality. But since it has a high-end processor, we wanted to test it at maximum power. And note that the average was 103 frames per second, the highest it got was 121 frames per second. So yes, it was able to get there, although in that attempt it had several fluctuations. Remember that this game after startup, if it's not able to maintain a stable experience, it adapts to 60 frames per second, and once it did that, it maintained a completely stable experience. So the truth is that the gaming experience is very good. Definitely, this device is the best you will be able to find if your priority is gaming. Although again, if you have enabled that option of improvement, the truth is that the temperature, if it becomes very high, in the case of SpongeBob, the resolution and quality are configured in high at 60 frames per second, but just to test the maximum power, we turned everything up to epic, and again, the device gave us very good results. Just at the beginning, it had a little instability, but the average observes that it was 59 frames per second. So really the experience is very good. The graphics look good. They look very good. Good detail effects. But again, the temperature is what scared us a little, as it reached up to 45.9 degrees Celsius. So we can say that if it is a device that could have some difficulties with respect to heating, and that in short games may not be very noticeable, but in long games may take its toll in a greater amount. Finally, Henshin Impact by default is at a medium level, but we raised it to the highest at 60 frames per second, also with the blur in very high quality. And again, it confirms that the performance will be far superior to what the competitors can offer you, is an exaggeratedly good processor that leaves far behind the processors used in its competition, so it confirms that it is an extremely good device to play, although again, the heating was present and exceeded 45 degrees Celsius, so it is highly recommended. Play in a cool environment, especially if you are going to use the setting we turned on. Otherwise, it is advisable to play with graphics quality a little lower, or also disabling the additional setting, as remember that too high temperatures could also degrade the battery status with greater speed. So please follow the recommendations, but definitely the performance is brutal. As a conclusion, I think it is something that we all anticipated but has been confirmed is a device that offers a very high performance, fully recommended for those who want a device that offers a very good gaming experience. Possibly the cameras will not be very outstanding, but I think most people are aware of that in a device of these characteristics that focuses the entire budget to the processor, the RAM and storage. However, in this case also the pleasant surprise has been the screen, which is definitely a very high visual experience, and also the incorporation of metal frames gives a much more premium feel in the hand, unlike other devices of this same brand. For now, this has been all for this video. I hope you liked it. If you did, you know you can indicate it, and see you next time.